and bring her back on. Let's see. Are you there, Carrie?
I am.
There you are. So we'll start this from the top.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Second Act Show. I'm John Tarnoff.
And I'm Carrie Hannon, and we are the Tom Petty and Stevie Nicks of Second Acts.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. So we have a great guest with us today on the Second Act Show, Hannah Morgan, and I want to do her justice. So I'm going to bring up our little intro here. So Hannah is a nationally recognized author, speaker, and job search strategist, and the awesomely useful website, Career Sherpa, where she provides guides and resources and also blogs about topics, techniques, and best practices that all job seekers should learn to help them maximize their careers. She's also a regular contributor to top outlets, including USA Today, Money, Huffington Post, Lifehacker, The Muse, and Business Insider. So today we're going to grill her about some of the hot tips and tricks for those of us on or nearing our second act career journey at a really interesting juncture in the job market with all of the crazy stuff going on the economy. So with that said, hey, Hannah.
Hey, Carrie and John. Thanks so much for having me.
So fun to have you here. Thank you. Thank you.
Great.
So the one question which we're going to start with, which we were talking about pre-show, that everyone is always asking me about, and I know, Carrie, you're getting this question a lot, is what about the applicant tracking systems and how do we avoid the applicant tracking systems and what's up with that? Why are there applicant tracking systems? Why can't anybody read a flipping resume anymore?
I know. Okay, well, so we didn't, you and I, we did not invent this whole process, right? If we invented it, it would be much, much better. But so we've transitioned from the days of emailing our resume to an individual to submitting our resume into a database, an applicant tracking system. And it's really just a big filing cabinet, right? And what is troublesome, what is problematic for job seekers is we don't know what happens once we send it off into that black hole. And honestly, I think if you asked 100 different recruiters how they access applicants that are in their applicant tracking system, you would get 99 different answers because they all use it a little bit differently. And there are thousands of these applicant tracking systems that allow you to do things differently in them. So the bottom line is that it's supposed to make life easier for the recruiters or human resources or talent acquisition, who's ever receiving these applications, to find the candidates that are most qualified. So some of these systems will rank the candidates that apply for jobs based on the frequency of keywords and the sort of assessment of some of the terminology or skills that the artificial intelligence is looking for in these resumes. So the bottom line is that we can't control what happens to our resume once somebody receives it, right? But what we can do is make sure that our resume, just our resume, clearly communicates in black and white how we have a majority of the requirements that the job is asking for. Like, that's what we can do. We can write a resume that is specifically customized for the jobs that we are applying for. But that's not the only thing that we can do. And I've been saying this since the beginning. The best way to make sure that somebody has your resume, right, is to follow up after you apply. That not necessarily following up with talent acquisition or the recruiter. It could be following up with somebody that you know inside the company and asking them, hey, I applied for the job. Do you know if my resume is in the system? Or, yeah, you sure could follow up with somebody inside the human resources, talent acquisition, and just a quick email. Hey, I submitted my resume. I just want to make sure you got it. If you have any questions, please let me know. And what's your time frame for filling this job? Then you get a little bit of information.
Right. And do you think that those that kind of outreach can be successful? Because a lot of people say that they feel like they're submitting resumes into black holes.
Right. You will always feel like you're submitting a resume into a black hole, right? Unless you get with that automated ping that says, we've received your resume, right? So that's why I want job seekers, no matter where they are in their career, to take ownership of the process. We can't wait for somebody in human resources, talent acquisition to get back for us. So the analogy I give is, if you needed to have something fixed in your house, like the cable TV, right? They give you wouldn't just say, hey, you wouldn't just wait for them to come and say, we'll be there at some point today. You would say, some point today isn't good enough. Can you give me a 1 hour window, right? So we sometimes have to push to get the service and response we want. So if somebody in HR, talent acquisition, is not getting back to you after you sent them a personalized email, then keep trying. Try other people.
What's a good interval for follow-up? And I think this applies. This is a question I get a lot in all things job search. How much time should you let between, say, submitting an application and following up, between an interview and a follow-up? What's the protocol?
Right. And it's too bad. The protocol for in an interview is, we can ask that question before we leave the interview, whether it's a phone interview or an in-person interview. Hey, I'd love to follow up with you. What are the next steps in the process, and when would be a good time frame for me to follow up with you? Right. That way we don't have to guess. Right. The employer will tell us, oh, we've got a lot more people to interview, probably a week or two. Great. I'll follow up with you in a couple of weeks. So go ahead, Carrie.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I was going to pull us back into a big picture. I know we started off drilled down to a very specific part of the job search, but Hannah, from, your broad picture coming out of the pandemic, how has the world of work changed for workers in our cohort that John and I address a lot, but it could be for everyone, 45 and up, an experienced worker? What do you see happening is, we hear a lot about a lot of people retired and now they're back at work again, or, they've started off on different, as entrepreneurs or what have you, but I'd just love your take, because you really have a good sense of this.
Right. If you look at the really big picture, like the biggest picture, what we know is that during the pandemic, a lot of people in our age cohort, dropped out of the workforce. They were afraid for health reasons, or they just didn't want to deal with it. It was too much work, whatever, for whatever reason, usually health and safety, they dropped out of the workforce altogether. Certain industries that might be different, like in the food service, we know a lot of older workers dropped out of food service, and they still had problems filling in those kinds of roles because a whole huge chunk of that workforce didn't want to be there for health and safety reasons. But overall, we know a lot of older workers dropped out of the workforce. So then they started to think, oh gosh, maybe things are getting better. Maybe I can get back into the workforce. And so that was part of it. A large part, and you mentioned this, Carrie, a large percentage of people decided to start their own business, hang their own shingle, be an entrepreneur, right? And so when things started to get better economically, we knew that a large part of that was due to the fact that a lot of people had started their own businesses. It was new business growth that was helping feed and fuel the economy. My hunch is there's still a lot of older workers that took that thought of retirement and are now thinking, shoot, I'm not going to be able to drink Mai Tais on the beach for the next 30 years, right?
Yeah.
So I got to go do something else. And I think that's going to be true for a lot of people that think retirement is going to be great. They have to figure out, like, what am I going to do with all my time? But I think there are people that are either financially worried that, maybe I don't have enough to fully retire. So I need to get back into the workforce. So those are the people that
with inflation and the stock market, I think we have a lot of people going, I think I want to keep working.
And for those people, it's hard because they have to make some decisions. Do I go get a job that is sort of an hourly worker, greeter at Walmart, Lowe's person, just something to have income coming in? Or do I do something that is meaningful, right? And that's where people, the older cohort, needs to really stop and think, what do I need out of the work that I'm going to do next? Because they've done so many different things over their career. Even if they've had one career progression, they've done a lot of things. And they have to reinvent and figure out, how do I take what I've done in the past and move that to something that is this bridge to retirement or a second act? What am I going to do next? And that takes a lot of soul searching. It's not always an easy thing because they can't step back into the role they used to have. That role they used to have has already gone to somebody else who's younger, or somebody else, usually younger. They promoted somebody internally into that role that they used to hold. So now they've got to figure out, okay, what is that role? Is it an individual contributor role? Is it a manager role? Is it starting my own business? Is it being a consultant? Is it working? There are all those questions.
This is a great segue into the question of branding. And I think what you're advising here is that we narrow down from all the things that we have done, perhaps over the course of our careers, we narrow down to something much more specific that we can basically package up as a value proposition. But to do that, we have to be able to talk about it. We have to be able to represent it. So you talk about branding a lot as a vehicle for this transformation, this reinvention. Tell us about that.
So, there's a what is it, Ikegi like model.
Ikigai, right? The Ikigai
yeah,
model.
Ikigai, yeah, right. And I love that as a framework because it is, what do you enjoy doing? What can you get paid for? And what does the world need? Right. When you overlap those three things, I think you're able to find that perfect fit for whatever phase of life you're in. And that's where I find a lot of people get stuck is, what do I enjoy doing? Because there are so much, and you really have to think about, it might be a very tiny subset of what your job was, right? Maybe you really love the act of procurement, right? The actual deal making and finding that person, right? But it was a much smaller part of what you did. You could have been in IT, you could have been in finance, you could have been in customer service, but that idea of procurement was your thing. Build from that, right? Now go see if the world needs that. Where, in what kind of capacity do they need that?
And the fourth piece of the Ikigai is, what can I get paid for?
Yeah.
Right. So there is this balance that I think you're talking about, where it's finding what you love, what you do well, what you can get paid for, and what the market needs.
Right.
And, but
so and we don't have the answers. So the thing is, where we sit, whoever we are, we don't have the answers to all those questions right now. So it takes conversations. And I would love to say there's an easy way to go find all that information on the net, the internet. But the best way to find that information out is to talk to people who are doing different things that you might be interested in. And ask them, where do you go to get your information? How do you stay up to date on this stuff? Where do you recommend I look? So those conversations are really going to be insightful. The thing is that I worry about for older workers is that because they've done so much, they think that everybody knows, like, what I've got 20 years of experience, and that should be enough to carry them through and be part of their brand. But that doesn't say exactly what they know how to do. Right.
Or what they know how to do now. Right. What's relevant from all that experience for the now? That's what employers are looking for.
They try to replicate what they did in the past because it's secure in a way. And that's gone. That's in the rearview mirror. But it's having that sense of adventure and it's a bit of a risk take to kind of find your brand and hold it. But Hannah also, and John, I know you agree with me on this. This stage of life is very much a quilt. You might do something it's not linear like our primary career may have been. So I think people get worried that if I'm going to start down this path, then that's my path. It's like not necessarily true.
it's true on so many levels, the patchwork analogy, Carrie, because, sometimes it's trial and error. You might find something that you think is going to be great, and then you realize, no, it's not. It's not what I thought it was going to be. It doesn't bring me the money I needed to be, whatever, right? But you've learned a lot about yourself in that process. It's not a failure. It's just a learning, right? The other thing is, no one says you have to do just one thing, right? So maybe you decide that you've always loved quilting, right? And you want to sell your quilts. Well, that's not going to necessarily financially pay the bills. So you can combine that with something else that you could get paid a little bit more for, right? So there's nothing that says we just do one thing. And I think that's another really interesting phenomena of the times that we are in. It's not hard to sell quilts online any longer, right? That was a huge stumbling block. We could very few outlets to sell our stuff, but an Etsy site, we could sell quilts all day long, and really it makes it much more profitable.
Yeah. I want to just acknowledge the chat. We've got a very active chat going on today.
Oh my gosh, yay.
Yes, Bridget Barnett, trustee, throws out a really nice line, which is old keys do not unlock new doors.
Oh, good one.
I love that line. So thank you, Bridget, for that. And I also want to just, for the people who are on the chat, a lot of conversation you guys are having about jobs and interviews and the trouble with that. But pay attention to what Hannah's saying here about the more entrepreneurial opportunities that we all have in the digital age to really leverage up and scale up our access to income through non-traditional, from our point of view, non-traditional sources.
But you should also always think of yourself as an entrepreneur, even if you're working for somebody else, right, Hannah? I mean,
yes.
that's
absolutely, and that ties into the branding and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Because when we think of ourselves as an entrepreneur, right, and it's sometimes that's a hard hat to put on, but it really becomes enlightening and empowering, right? I could do a lot of things, but what I really love doing is helping people with the job search process. I could do career coaching, but I don't really love that as much as I love the job search part of that. So when I think about that, where could I go do job search stuff besides having my own business? I could do that in a college career center. I could do that in many different nonprofit organizations. I could do it for like private companies that have their own coaches. So when I think of what I love to do and think of that as a business and think, okay, where else could I do that? I think it opens up the avenues of different types of jobs that we may not be thinking about. And that's one of the things I think when we've been in the workforce a long time, we only know what we know. This is a great time to broaden our horizons. I've heard so many people say, I want to work for a big, stable company. Well, is that really it? I don't think that that's the goal anymore at this point in life.
Big stable companies aren't so big and stable anymore.
No, we all want stability, and I don't know how there isn't such a thing any longer.
More stability. So
I want to hear about Hannah's journey, John, or do you have something before that?
I know before I want to just kind of get this point about the.
I like people's stories.
The stability. No. We've got time to talk about Hannah's story, but I want to get into something that really is. We're in the midst now of this teeter-totter between what has been the great resignation over the last year or so to what I think is developing into the great supplication, where people are going to be kind of pleading to get back into their jobs over the next 6 to 9 months. How do older workers navigate this? Where are we going to be in this equation where all of a sudden maybe there were more job opportunities happening? Are we going to get stampeded over the next 9 months by younger workers trying to get back into the roles, or am I reading too many headlines?
Well, I don't think you're reading too many headlines. I think that those headlines all exist. And I think that as an individual, we can't obsess over what every headline says. What we can do is say, how can I best control this situation for myself? Because sometimes the headlines are so big picture, they don't apply to our unique situation and our employer, right? So what this means is, as an individual, we need to be watching the signs inside the company that we're working for. What is happening? Am I hearing rumblings of downsizing? Am I hearing rumblings of buyouts? What am I hearing, listening through the grapevine and paying attention? And if it's not my company, what about our competitors? What are they doing, right? So a really good example is Tesla, right? Tesla is calling people back to the office right now. And they're saying, if you're not willing to work in the office 40 hours at least, then maybe it's time that you look for something else. Well, that's not all companies, right? But it is Tesla. So if you're a Tesla employee, that should be a big red flag. Like, oh, shoot, they're going to make me come back to the office. I don't want to come back to the office. That means I need to start looking for a new job.
Right. Right.
Because things are not going to get better for me here at Tesla.
Yeah.
So it's really being more in tune to what is going on inside your company, because every company is different.
Right.
And also,
But there
also
are tumultuous times coming. Like I think that if you aren't paying attention to what's going on inside of your company now, for everybody, is a really good time to do that.
Yeah.
And you have to stay relevant. I mean, you have to raise your hand and ask for those new, that new assignment, or to be part of the workplace development program. You have to show that you have value, and you can't just sit back and be fearful that your number is up next, right? I mean, you've got to.
Right. There are lots of things that people can do that can prove their value. And I think, become part of a task force, offer to be part of the mentor program, mentor-mentee program, or offer to start one up inside your company, right? Take initiative to be of value, learn new skills, right? John, we were just having some technical difficulties, and Carrie was noting how you're able to fix this kind of technological problem, right? If you can fix that stuff, if you can take initiative to learn new software, to learn new technology, to be the implementer, the guinea pig of testing it as it rolls out, there's so many different things that the seasoned worker can do rather than just coast out their final years. And I think that's the problem, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to be seen as somebody who's coasting. You want to be adding value. You want to be solving problems. You want to be learning new things.
Oh, I love that message. I love it. So John, can we hear Hannah's story now?
Yes, because we are wrapping up. So we just have a very few minutes, but Hannah, we'd love to hear, how did you get here, and what's your second act journey?
So I had no idea that career consulting was even a thing, right? So I started off thinking I was going to be a lawyer, worked in Washington, D.C., and realized, oh, shoot, I don't want to be a lawyer. So then I worked for an agency that did placement, a temporary agency that placed legal assistants, right? Because they knew I worked for a law firm. So then that got me into the whole employment world. Then I worked for a company, and they had me in HR, and I was hiring and firing people. And from there, I said, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. And Lee Hecht Harrison, the national outplacement service provider, had an opening in my city, and I stumbled into that. And that is where I discovered that I loved helping people with the job search process. So, and what's next? Like, here's the deal. I love working with one-on-one with clients, right? So I am now in the process of trying to reinvent and figure out, okay, what is next for me? Because there are a lot of people doing what I do, and I'm not them. So I've got to find something new for me. And so the reinvention never ends, is my point.
I love it.
I love that. That's a great place to end up. So, thank you so much, Hannah, for joining us today. This has been a great conversation. I want to just quickly throw up our card for our next second act show, which is going to be 2 weeks from today on June 16th with the wonderful Chris Farrell, the author of Unretirement. And then beyond that, we're going to talk to the founders of Startup Women and Tim Driver from Retirement Jobs and age-friendly employers. So that should be, we've got 3 great sessions coming up over the early part of the summer. So with that said, everyone, thank you for joining us today on the Second Act Show, and we will see you on our next one. And thanks, Hannah, for joining us again.
Bye, Hannah. Thank you.
Thank you.